What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Berquist Armament channel. Today I'll be doing an inspection on this LANTAC M-SPEC BCG. This is a titanium nitride coating. So as you can see, the carrier is finished in titanium nitride, the bolt, and the extractor claw. So in this video, we will do the inspection and see how this thing gauges out. But before we get into everything, this video is sponsored by Berquist Armament, this channel, by myself. I build custom upper receiver groups, so if you're interested in getting your own custom upper receiver group, head over to my bio and the link to my website will be there, and go check out the upper receiver groups, or if you're looking for a custom build, reach out. Now let's get into this thing. So one thing I wanted to mention before we start diving into everything here is this BCG was specifically chosen for this 10.5. So let's go ahead and see why I chose this specific BCG for this overgas 10.5-inch barrel. So as I was taking a look at the extractor spring, I noticed that it was canted. So I wanted to get that thing straightened out, but honestly it was wedged in there so tightly that I decided to remove it. And as I was removing it, the spring actually broke in half. So I don't know if the spring was compromised or if it was just in there so tight that I actually broke the spring, but regardless, we need to fit this new spring in here. And real quick here, I wanted to show this. So let's go ahead and see if the normal extractor spring will fit inside of the extractor. Let's line it up and firmly press down. And if it does not fall into place, I usually like to go by hand tight. So if I press down with the weight of my fingers and it will not pop in, then it's too tight. It needs to be resized. So let's go ahead and resize the inner diameter of where it holds the extractor spring. Now that we've taken off some of the material inside of here, let's see if the enhanced extractor spring will fit in there. And yet again, it's too thick here. I cannot fit the spring in, so let's go ahead and remove some more material. I did get it to partially pop in, so it is very close. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go one more pass and take off a little bit more material, but instead of 10 rotations around, I'm going to only do 5. So we're just going to take off a little bit more. So here we have our enhanced 5-coil extractor spring installed, and as you can hear, we popped it in, and as you can see, it is nice and straight and looking very good. So that's what we want to see. Let's go ahead and take a look at the extractor retaining pin movement. So we're going to go ahead and set it in there and just make sure it spins freely, and that looks good. Let's go ahead and take a look at our extractor claw. So this is going to be the no-go, so we do not want this to take. So let's go ahead and insert it if we can, and it will not take. Next, let's go ahead and use the go side. The go side does indeed fit inside of there, so that looks good. So the extractor claw is within spec. And then I also wanted to take a look at the ejector roll pin and just make sure it is flushly fitted in there. Sometimes these can be overhung, and this one looks very good. Alright, let's go ahead and test the headspace on this bolt. So first we have 14646, so this is going to be 556 go. And that is good. So this is a 556 chambered barrel, which is good. And then here is our 14686. So this is a intermediate gauge. This is simply to let you know when your chamber is starting to open up. Okay, nope. Nope. And no. Very good. So this bolt is within headspace, which is what you would expect. And this is at about 1800 rounds. So we've gotten in there a little bit, but not too bad. So this is a pass. Next, let's go ahead and test the 3-bore. First, we're going to start with the bolt tail. We'll start with our first green gauge. That goes through pretty easy. Our second green gauge. Man, that is very loose. And then our yellow gauge. Okay, that goes through as well. And then let's get out our final red gauge. And that will take as well. So obviously this is not ideal, but this just means that the area where it holds the bolt tail into place is a little bit loose. So it's going to exhaust more gas off the back. It's not going to hold the gas as well. If your gun is undergassed, this is not necessarily a bad thing, but this is, in this situation, on an overgassed, maybe not overgassed, but a very violent 10.5-inch barrel, the fact that this is leaking gas is actually beneficial, and that's why I chose to put this BCG inside of the 10.5. So on the bolt tail, it is a little bit loose, but that is okay. And then let's also take a look at the bolt tail roundness. I don't think we're going to be able to because this is so off spec. Man, this is the red gauge and it is very loose still. But let's try to take a look at it. The bolt tail roundness is pretty uneven. There are some spots where it makes good contact. I think the end conclusion here is even the red gauge is pretty loose, so we're not going to be able to really tell where it is even and uneven. But as we can see, there's a lot of light going through there. Okay, next let's take a look at the gas ring run. Let's start with our first green gauge. And that will take. Next, let's go on to our second green gauge here. And that will take as well. Our yellow gauge. That will take. Our first red gauge. And that will not take. It's just wanting to start, but it's not going in. So I would say we're at yellow on the gas ring run. Next, let's move on to the bolt shoulder support. Our first green gauge. It will take. second green gauge. That will take as well. Okay, next is going to be our yellow gauge. And that will take, but that is very tight. And then we're going to move on to our second yellow gauge. And that will not take. So we're sitting at the first yellow gauge for our bolt shoulder support. Next, let's take a look at the length of the carrier, which we are looking for 667. Okay, 667, 667, 667. So very good. That's where we want to be. Let's go ahead and do a gas key torque test. So we have it set to 30 inch-pounds. Let's go ahead and test. No movement, so that's good. And no movement. Very good. That's what we want to see. Let's go ahead and test the gas key pathway. And we can see the line at the other end there, so that is a pass. So very good. Nothing is blocking this channel here. So next up, we're going to go ahead and test the gas key alignment. So here we have our first green gauge here. And let's go ahead and see if this gas key is aligned. Okay. Some resistance. Okay, that went through. Some resistance again. Some resistance. Some resistance. Let's see if we can try rotating this. Okay, held up, passed through, held up, passed through, held up, passed through, and passed through. So I think after moving this in this upper that we know is aligned, I think it's pretty close, and I don't see any issues with this. If I really thought this was off, like if it was off, I would probably go ahead and test this in the upper, but I already know it's looking good, so I'm not going to go ahead and do that. But it's close enough, so we're going to call it good. Okay, let's go ahead and test the gas key diameter. So here we have our go gauge, and that will take, and then we have our no-go, and that will take. Okay. Okay. So, not the end of the world. That just means that the gas key internal diameter is a little bit wider, so there is going to be some gas leakage when it meets up with the gas tube. So it's not going to be a perfect fit. There's not going to be a perfect seal on here. Some of the gas will leak out. Is that a big concern? No. Is that something you want to see buying out of, buying a nice BCG out of the factory? Is that what you want to see? No. But it's not the end of the world either. So that's not a pass, but in this specific upper, I know it works just fine, so it's just fine. Let's go ahead and take a look at the cam pin fitment. So here we have our cam pin. So we're going to insert it. And we're just going to move it around and see how the fitment is. And it doesn't feel too bad. So that's a pass. Okay, next let's go ahead and take a look at the firing pin protrusion. So we want to be between 0.028 and 0.036. So 0.035, 30, and 30. So we're good to go. That's in between 0.28 and 0.36, so that is a pass. It's in the envelope or the zone that we want it to be in. Okay, next let's take a look at the firing pin tip. So it is a little dirty here. Let's see if we can wipe it off a little bit. There we go. Much better. So this has been fired quite a bit, but the firing pin tip is still looking pretty good. So that is a pass. Okay, next let's take a look at the bolt tail. So let's start with our first gauge. This is the yellow gauge, the no-go gauge, and it will not take. So that is a pass. Very good. Okay, next let's take a look at the bolt shoulder width. This is not the ideal instrument to measure this. However, I still like to get this on there and just see how it's coming in. So we want to be at 0.528. Okay, 0.528. A little under 0.528. It's just another area. 0.529. 0.528. A little under 528. The bolt shoulder support is very close to where it's supposed to be, so I'm not too worried about it. So we're going to go ahead and give this a pass. I'm not going to, throw away the bolt just because the bolt shoulder support is a little bit under. But if it's like a lot under and it seems like there's an issue, then yes, I would go ahead and replace that. But at this point, it's not perfect, but it's acceptable. Okay, last thing we're going to do here, we're going to test out the firing retainer pin movement. So this is the original retainer pin, and as you can see, it's a little bit disformed and all this stuff, and it was bent to try to get it to stay in here because it would not move in there. But at this point, I've seen this retainer pin rubbing on the upper receiver, and last time I took this out, it was actually recessing out a little bit after I clearly placed it in the upper properly, but it was sitting kind of like that, and you could see on the edge it was protruding like that, and it was rubbing on in the upper. So I've tried to do the best I can with this one, and at this point it's not being retained in the pocket, so I'm going to go ahead and replace it with a new firing retainer pin. So we're going to get rid of that, put in a new one, and this one just slides in. So the old one actually was having issues just sliding in. This one will just slide in like that, and it will stay recessed, and it looks like it is very smooth, and it is. Yep. So the movement is very smooth. It can go in and out very easily. There's no special trick where you have to wiggle it to get in there anymore. You can simply just put it in like that. So that is how it's supposed to be, and that is a pass. Alright guys, that is going to be the full inspection of the LANTAC M-SPEC BCG. And overall, it did alright, not the best, but definitely one of the worst BCGs I own, but it works, and I specifically chose it for this 10.5 because the bolt tail does leak quite a bit of gas, and the gas key does leak a little bit of gas as well. Roscoe 10.5-inch barrel is one of the more reasonably gassed barrels, in my opinion, or from what people say online. But it's still, in my opinion, overgassed with the perfectly gassed BCG. So obviously I chose this because it is leaking a bit of gas, so it is ejecting where I want it to be with 55 grain 5.56. I only shoot 5.56, and it's either going to be 55 grain or 77 grain. And this specific BCG is gassed perfectly with a suppressor, and it's a little light on gassing if I was just going to run it unsuppressed, but I primarily run this thing suppressed. So yeah, this thing is awesome. But anyways, So there we have our completed BCG. And then lastly, let's go ahead and take a look at the gas rings. And it's going to be hard to stand it up here, but that is a pass. It's not collapsing. So overall, not the worst BCG I have seen, but not the best either. It definitely is on the worst side of things, I would say, because of the gas leaking out of the gas key and the bolt tail. But it is what it is, and it matches the 10.5 perfectly. So that's going to be it for me. And let me know what you think of this specific BCG in the comments. Let me know what you think of the titanium nitride finish, if you think it looks good. I think it looks pretty good, especially on the FDE 10.5. Overall, I appreciate you guys for watching, and if you liked this video, go ahead and give it a like, and then subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And that's going to be about it for me. So I'll see you guys in the next one.